In this demo, I'm going to show you how to create the lid for your ceramic box. In this situation, this is where you are applying a flat slab that lays on top of the opening of your box, and it includes those flanges. So the lesson objectives are to create a functioning lid with a unique handle or a knob, and you're incorporating a flange for the lid so it does not easily slide off the ceramic box. It's a good idea for the slab for the lid to be leather hard, so make sure you have dried it out using newspaper, because with this type of situation we want to make sure that we're keeping the lid as flat as possible. If there's any curves in your lid, it will dry like that. So when we put the lid on, we want that situation. We do not want that to happen. And even before you get to that point, you want to make sure that this box is entirely complete, that the edges are all straight, and you want to make sure that your box is actually truly leveled. If it's not truly leveled, you can actually trim the upper parts with a fettling knife. Now, here's a concern. If you lay the slab on top, right? If you lay it on top and your slab is too short, you will have to remeasure the opening of your box. It's not a big deal though, because all you need to do is take a ruler and actually just measure how wide is it this way and how wide is it that way, and take a look at the measurements. Then you can roll out a new slab and cut those measurements. So you can work through that dilemma. Now, if you put your slab on the top of your box and it's too long, we do need to trim the edges with the fettling knife, because we want to make sure that this lid is actually flush on the surface of your. So looking at my example, there's a little bit of an overhang, so I do need to note where I need to trim. I'm also feeling all sides of my box to make sure that the walls are flush, that we don't have anything overhanging too much. So to cut off that overhanging, I'm going to carefully first position the lid as best as I can, and then I'm going to draw just a line underneath the lid here so I know where to trim. So after I've pretty much, I have the lid positioned how I want, your next step is adding a flange. Don't forget about that. So to create a flange, you will need a slab. It can be thinner than 1/4 inch thick. So for example, I had this slab here. To make the slab thinner, I actually just went in with a smaller rolling tool just to make it thinner. It doesn't have to be super thick. Now, there are two ways that you can attach the flange. You can attach the flange to the lid itself. The other option is attaching the flange to the inner wall of the box, but the lid needs space to accommodate the flange. So as you can see in this diagram here, this is the box, the body of the box. You have the flanges that stick up a bit, but then you're going to need to actually carve into the lid so the flange can meet with the lid, or else the lid does not stay on the surface. For this video, I'm going to just demonstrate how to attach a flange to the lid itself. You'll take your lid, and first of all, you need to go in with a fettling knife to determine where to place the flange. Now, the walls of your box are about 1/4 inch thick. So this gives us a clue as to where to measure. We don't want to measure exactly at 1/4 because we don't want the lid somehow not fitting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ruler and measure more than 1/4. I'm going to measure 1/2 inch. 1/2 inch. I'm going to make a little mark, a little tick mark. That is just so I know where that edge is. I'm going to again measure 1/2 inch, and I'm going to do this for all 4 sides of my lid. After I made my little tick marks, I am going to take my needle tool just to draw a really light outline. So I'm going to end up with a square. and this will help me know where to attach my flange. So now I have these lines. I'm going to take a ruler, and we don't want our flanges to be too long. I would say 1/2 inch is another good measurement to use for your flange. So you need literally strips of clay that are 1/2 inch thick. If you feel like that is too thick, of course you can roll it out with your roller. You do want your strips to be straight. If your clay is not cooperating, it could be too soft, which means you need clay that is leather hard. To attach the flange, you will need enough that's going to go across the entire way, so you can actually line it up along that line there. I'm going to take a fettling knife to cut that edge off. And then we're going to score and slip this on. So I have all 4 pieces of my flange ready, so I'm going to go ahead and score where I'm going to position them. Then you're going to score and slip all of the flange pieces on, carefully positioning them so they're straight. You can lightly tap the slab to make sure it's on there. Now aesthetically, if you want to blend the edges of the flange into themselves, you could. But your next step is actually helping to clean up the joints. You do not need reinforcement coils because this is so small, and as long as you scored and slipped it really well, it should stay on. So I just like to take a sculpting tool to carefully clean up those edges. You could also use a ball stylus tool to kind of get into those crevices there. But don't forget, you're not just cleaning up the outside, but you will be cleaning up the inside as well. Now remember, this is wet clay, so you do have to let it set up before you put it on top of your box to make sure that it fits. It might have to dry a little bit. So now we're going to test out the flange and laying it on top. Again, we want to make sure the flange is not touching the walls too closely. And once you are pretty much done, like you've put the lid on and everything fits, make sure you clean the edges of your lid with your fingers and water, kind of clean off those edges. We do want to make sure the lid is flush with the sides of the box, so that is something you continually should be checking for before you turn in your work. And of course, double check that the lid will actually fit. In this demo here, you noticed I did not put my handle on, right? I didn't put my knob on. So I do suggest attaching the handle or the knob after you finish the lid. But just be careful when you put your knob or handle on. Again, we want to keep the lid flat. We don't want to accidentally push the lid inward. So as you work on your handle or knob for your lid, you can always just place it on the table. The flange does keep everything flat, and then you can work on attaching your handle or knob. And that's how you finish the lid.